Hi, welcome to the Cottage Real Estate Channel with Matt Mosier, and I am Matt. Today I wanted to talk about how to increase your net worth by $50,000, $100,000 or more by buying a cottage. That may sound like quite a claim, but people do it all the time. Now, first of all, I'm not talking about the equity built into your cottage with your down payment. So of course that is when, let's say you buy a cottage for $500,000 and you put down 10%. So you put down $50,000. So when you do that, you're essentially building in equity into your place. You have $50,000 of equity in your cottage. However, you didn't really create extra equity. You're just parking or almost like forced savings with your money, putting it into your cottage. You're securing it in the real estate product itself. That's not really the equity that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about creating additional equity on top of the down payment that you've put in. There are a couple ways that you can create the extra equity in addition to your down payment. One is purchasing the cottage or house for less than market value. A lot of the times I'm going to be referring to a cottage, but these principles are across the board. You can use this for a condo or for a home or a farm, anything really. The principles are the same. But I do live in cottage country up in Parry Sound, which is, if you're familiar with Muskoka, Georgian Bay, that's the area. Actually here, I'll show you exactly where we are. So welcome to cottage country. And so a lot of these cottage principles, as I've said, they're applicable to most real estate transactions or deals. Let's use the example of a property that's market valued at $500,000. If you purchase it for $500,000, and let's say your down payment is $50,000, just using 10% as an easy math way to go, you haven't created any extra net worth. You've only taken, and again, let's assume you have $50,000 of cash that you're using. You're taking that and you're just putting it somewhere else. You haven't created any extra net worth. You've just taken $50,000 and secured it into your real estate. Let's use that $500,000 market value property as the example. So instead of purchasing for a full asking price of $500,000, let's say that you were able to get it for $400,000 just for easy math. Forgetting about the down payment completely, $400,000 value on the open market of $500,000, you've essentially created $100,000 of equity. But how do you do that? How would you be able to buy a $500,000 valued property for $400,000? Well, there's a few different ways. And I should say that this is not doable in every situation, but it is in some. So let's say, for example, that the property was listed lower than value. We see this all the time where a property ends up selling for a certain amount, but it started off much higher because either the seller or the agent truly felt the value was higher than it was, or they thought they'd test the market and see what they could possibly get it for. In cases like that, you're probably not going to get a great deal. But in the other way, sometimes places get listed for less than what the actual market value is. Or if the seller has to sell for some reason, maybe they are going through a financial situation, a marital breakup, maybe it was an inheritance. For different reasons, they may choose and willingly market the property at a lower value than what the market value is. So they list it, let's say they list it for $450 or $425, knowing that somebody's going to get a deal, but the goal is to sell quickly. So if you have a really motivated seller, you can often get a deal in cases like that. Another way that you can potentially purchase a property with built-in extra equity is negotiating. A lot of cases, we can actually negotiate a lower purchase price. The asking price may be right at market value or even higher, but if we can negotiate and essentially validate why the purchase price should be lower, then we can get a deal. If we were to offer a lower price, but give great terms, the seller sometimes will go for that. So if we offered the price we wanted, let's say we wanted that for $450,000 and the seller wanted $500,000, but we said, we'll close in 3 weeks and you don't have to remove any of the junk that's there. We'll take care of it all. and we're not requiring you to do anything else. Just we'll sign off on it. The buyers take all responsibility for the removal of items, whatever else the seller was hoping to avoid, really. So we're making the overall deal acceptable to the seller with terms he's okay with other than price, but he's willing to let that go. That's one way you can negotiate a better purchase price. So you're negotiating built-in equity for yourself, and the seller gets terms that he's okay with as well. That's a great way to get equity right from the start. One way to not get a deal, usually, is to buy a property that everything's been done to it already. For example, if you had a property that was pretty rough, someone buys it, they renovate it, they fix it up, they put the new roof on, new flooring, cabinets, kitchen, bathroom. They do all the things that a buyer might want to do. Then they put it back up for sale. They've essentially flipped the property. When they do that, they've paid all the expenses and the costs for those upgrades to be done. They want full value for that usually. So they're going to want top dollar because they've already done the work. A buyer just has to walk in and start enjoying the property. So there's a price to be paid for that. You're usually not going to get a great deal for that because they've probably done it with the intention of making profit. So I'd say if you're looking to get a deal, try not to buy properties that have been purchased and sold fairly quickly or are trying to sell them very quickly, or places that everything's been done to them. There's no room for you to build an equity or to start from a lower point position for price. One way to build in equity right from the purchase would be to find the properties that have been in the family for years. Quite often we see that a property has been in the family for 50 years or more. And again, quite often, it's not always the case. Sometimes you'll walk into these properties and they're really dated. There's the old green carpet, that beautiful green orange shag carpet that everybody loved and everybody bought back in the 70s. Some buyers will look at and they just walk away from it because it's so dated. They couldn't imagine living in there. But an investor or a smart buyer will often look at these properties and they see opportunity for built-in equity. So when looking at these properties, you have to know your comfort zone. Everybody has a different comfort zone with the amount of work they want to get involved in. Now, some people, if they see a crack in a foundation or if they see a beam underneath that looks a little sketchy, they may not want to get into that. And for myself personally, I don't really get too excited about anything that looks like it has structural issues, or if there's a foundation work, drainage, any issues like that in the basement, I tend to shy away from because it's not really my area of expertise, and you can rack up a lot of money really quick just to get back to the basics. What I find is the easier and quite often more profitable items are just updating. If a place needs a new kitchen or bathroom, new flooring, even if you took the old wood paneling and painted a nice bright cottage color, that goes a long way with first impressions, which equates to value. So if you look at these places that have been not too run down, but just dated, you can build in a lot of extra equity and value by doing the updating yourself. To make this work, you have to know your numbers and do some basic math. So as a minimum, you need to know what the property would be worth once it's fixed up. So if you put this work into it, you update it, you renovate the bathroom, kitchen, whatever it is that it needs to bring it up to good standard, at that point, what would the market value be? And based on your purchase price, can you make those changes and do those upgrades for less money? So purchase price plus your improvements, what is that number compared to the market value of a similar property once those things have been done? So you have to do a little bit of math with calculations of what's it going to cost to fix it up. Are you going to do the kitchen, the bathroom, all the flooring, walls? Does it need a new roof? What are the items that are going to add the most value to that property? What's the cost going to be? You may have to get a contractor involved if you're not familiar with all this stuff yourself. If you are a contractor, that's a great head start, and we see a lot of contractors buying properties and making good money off of fixing up themselves, doing the work, putting it back on the market, or renting it out if you're allowed in the township that you're purchasing in. So that's the basic game, to buy it lower than market value. And especially if there's a lot that needs to be done, you can usually negotiate a lower price because of all the work that has to be done. The catch-22 is any agent will almost always tell you, well, we took that into consideration when we established the asking price. So they're going to say, well, we know it's valued at $500,000 if everything was done, but we know there's $100,000 of work to be put into it. That's why it's listed at $400,000. The asking price already has incorporated the room for the work to be done. So that's where you have to get into a little bit of negotiating and hopefully negotiate a lower price than that, so you have some room to work and still make some money off of it. And once you do establish a lower purchase price, then how are you going to do the work required for less money? That could be including a friend who's a contractor, family members, doing it yourself if you have the knowledge. One thing to be cautious of, though, is to over-improve. Let's say that all the cottages or homes in that area that have, let's say, 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, with a usable basement for a family room, a basic structure like that. If everything's selling for $500,000 and you have purchased for $400,000 and you've gone overboard with your upgrades, granite countertops, marble floors, things that are actually out of characteristic for your market that you're in, and maybe you put $150,000 into the place, you're now overpriced. You'd have to sell for over $550,000 to break even. So not only have you not built an extra equity, you've actually gone the opposite way. And you may have to hold on to the property for a number of years until market value catches up to what you've done. So be very cautious with that. You don't want to overbuild. You want to be very mindful of the market values of similar properties that are finished. And then you have to be very careful with your budget. Set a budget, get quotes, and hold people to those budgets. And that's where it's quite often not good to get into structural issues or foundation, major drainage issues. Those issues can easily, if you're quoted $20,000 to fix a foundation, that could easily double if they run into more items that they didn't anticipate. Sometimes when you're starting out, it's best just to keep it simple and be a little more conservative. Go on the safe side. Do the things that there's not a huge risk, I guess, of going way over your budget. If you get quoted for a kitchen and the quote is, say, $10,000, it's not likely going to turn into a $30,000 bill. Foundations, totally different. Structural issues, you can run into lots of things that you didn't anticipate. Another way to build in extra equity right from the point of sale is to look for opportunities to make the property more valuable. What I mean is, based on what it is now, maybe there's some things you could do to the property once you own it that would create extra value to the place. An example might be, let's say you were able to put an extra bathroom. You had a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, and the 1 bathroom's on the main level, and there's a rec room. Or maybe there's a basement that's unfinished. And you're on, let's say you're right in town, so you have town water. We're not dealing with septic systems in that case. Town water, town municipal sewers. And let's say there's no issues and you can get a permit to finish the basement and put a bathroom in there. So you purchase the place based on having 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with an unfinished basement level. And if you can renovate that lower level to be extra living space, to have a rec room with a bathroom, you've substantially increased the living space, the usable living space of that property, which increases the value. Again, the key is to put in less money doing that compared to the value you're creating in the property. And that's some good budgeting, budget management as well. Again, my goal is to keep things simple. So let's go look at an actual example of a property that you could completely walk in and make some big changes that would increase the value right away. But before we get into this, first, just take 1 second and hit that like button. It goes a long way with helping the channel, and also subscribe. If you're interested in cottage country, in real estate in general, and investing tips, hit the subscribe button so you can see future videos that will be posted. I'll show you a few items at this property where you could definitely increase the value. One thing I'm seeing here is the wood. All the wood for the decking, it's pretty much shot. Again, these are items that will help us negotiate a lower price if it hasn't already been built into the price. And we can first of all see that the flooring is quite dated, so we would replace the carpets. Windows are also an item that you should take a look at. These windows are quite old. We can see we have the sliders on the bottom and the top. If there are windows that have the metal frames, you can see, and you probably can't see that right now, but there's usually a date stamped in the windows, and that's the date that they were manufactured. And this one's in 1979, so they've had a good run, but you'd want to replace those. And even with this kitchen, what I do see is the layout is open concept. There's lots of room, and it has a ton of possibilities. Finding properties that you can add extra value from renovating, or even just small things like painting, new flooring, these easier things that can add a lot of value just by increasing the first impression that a buyer would have when they walked in. And in addition to adding value by fixing up and updating, we can look at ways to increase the value by adding to the property, creating something that wasn't quite there before, adding the extra bathroom or a lower family living room, rec room, things like that that can add to it, as long as you're increasing the value more than what the cost is to put those things in. And I didn't even get into the tax implications that work to your benefit when you're doing this. When you're updating things, you're putting money and effort into your property, you can have tax deductions which help on the back end as well, which we can do in another episode. But for now, hit that like button if you didn't already, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.